It was 1996 and I was a senior in high school. For the past year, my grandfather Nolan had suffered from a lung condition called pulmonary fibrosis. One afternoon, my mom called me at work to tell me that he had just passed away and was still in the house if I wanted to see him. Little did I know that I was about to have an experience that would change my life forever. When I arrived at my grandparents' house, my grandmother was understandably distraught. My grandfather lay on his lazy boy, dressed in a hospital gown. He was not the same man I had known. His spirit had gone, and his body was empty, leaving me with an eerie feeling. He had once been the most jovial person you would ever encounter. Now, he lay there vacant. I spent several minutes embracing him and looking into his empty eyes. After they carried him away in the body bag, I spent some time in his room going through his things. As I rummaged through my grandfather's closet, my eyes fell on a familiar sight: his prized snakeskin belt. It was more of a strap than a belt, but he had put a buckle on it. The last time I had seen it was when I was just a child. My grandfather had told me that a Native American he met as a boy during his time in the CCC camps had made it for him. I didn't know all the details, but I was cautioned never to touch or wear the belt due to its religious significance, which I found to be a shame. Now that he was no longer with us, I was going to wear it in his memory. My grandfather had a fascination with snakes and was quite skilled at crafting snakeskin items. He had learned the skill from the mysterious Native American who gave him the belt. At Christmas time, he would always gift one lucky family member a handmade snakeskin item. As a child, I was fond of feeding mice to his pet snakes, but unfortunately, I never had the privilege of receiving one of his special gifts. It wasn't until my grandfather's funeral that I discovered he was a Mason. The ceremony was led by 3 unfamiliar men wearing white lambskin aprons. Despite their formal attire, they seemed distant and unfriendly, leaving me to wonder how my grandfather had come to be associated with such strange individuals. They burned incense in a silver bowl and wafted the smoke over his casket. It smelled like sage. I'd only known my grandfather as a passionate snake enthusiast, so this revelation was surprising. During this time, my girlfriend and I drove up the coast to Big Sur National Park to go camping. She had recently started taking medication for her epilepsy, allowing us more freedom to go places. We arrived late and set up in a remote area, away from anyone else. That night, I had a lucid dream, a dream unlike any I had ever had or wished to have again. In my dream, I found myself surrounded by complete darkness, yet my body was strangely illuminated. Suddenly, an old landline phone rang loudly beside me. As I picked it up, my grandfather appeared before me, also illuminated in the darkness. However, he appeared disheveled and not quite himself. His sparse white hair was matted, and he had an unshaven look. His breathing was labored and sounded like a faint growl. Confused, I asked, "How are you calling me when you're dead?" There was no response. I repeated my question, "How can you be calling me when you're dead?" Then, with tremendous effort, he murmured something inaudible. It was then that I realized that something was off. This was not the same grandfather I knew and loved. His eyes started to become dark and glassy. His cheeks sunk in, taking on a dry, scaly texture that seemed almost reptilian. Suddenly, he clutched at his throat with a guttural scream of "Belt!" that chilled me to my very core. In an instant, his jaw fell from his face, the flesh tearing away like paper, and just as shock began to set in, tiny white and brown mice with crimson eyes began to spill out of his mouth and eye sockets, flooding the area with their frenzied movements. As I jerked awake, my eyes were met with an unexpected sight. A glowing orb hovering directly above my face. The sound of buzzing flies filled the air, their frantic movements bouncing off the canvas of the tent like pattering rain. Fear left me paralyzed, but I managed to stammer out, "Grandpa, if that's you, I'm sorry, please leave." The orb began to tremble, and then suddenly divided into 3 smaller orbs, darting away into the night. Groggily, I attempted to wake my girlfriend, but she was in the midst of a partial seizure. I called out her name and squeezed her hand tightly until she regained consciousness. When she finally came to, she insisted that we leave the area immediately. Despite my reluctance to leave in the middle of the night with no available lodging nearby, her palpable fear convinced me otherwise. As I rushed to put on my pants, I realized that my snakeskin belt had vanished. I asked her if she had seen it, but she vehemently declared, "Forget about that belt. I never want to see that evil belt again." As we drove away, my girlfriend told me a vivid dream she had experienced. In it, we were tied to a log with snakeskin straps at our campsite. about to be used as a human sacrifice in a strange ritual by a Native American shaman. Just as he was about to plunge his blade into her neck, 3 men wearing white aprons appeared and began chanting and wafting incense over us. When the knife entered her, she awoke and began convulsing. I've never had any communication with my grandfather since that night, and I'm left to wonder if it was all just a bad dream. But the chilling memory of that experience remains with me, haunting me and leaving me with an unshakable sense of unease that I know will linger for the rest of my days.